Hey BookTube, it's V. Today we are discovering and discussing unpopular Dresden Files opinions, as told by r/Dresden Files on Reddit. Top comment: Lee was entirely right with everything she said about how Dresden was doing a poor job of training Molly to be a wizard. Did he mean it? Nah, of course not. But the damage his kindness has caused is considerable. I can kind of see that. Harry kind of has this thing about being gallant or overbearing and chauvinistic towards women, and so he probably tried to protect Molly a little bit too much, and then that backfired in the events of Cold Days. She really had to step up, and I don't think she was in the right place or properly prepared for that. Let's see what everybody else has to say. There are ways to be a strict teacher without being cruel. He didn't actually need to be like Lee or Justin, so the fact that Lee is right doesn't justify her particular methods. But yeah, he probably needed to drill her harder and more seriously. Oh sure, don't get me wrong, I wasn't expecting him to be pelting her body full of rocks until she got it right. But there's a huge amount of ground between the snowballs and going full Justin. I would not have wanted Justin Newmorn to be my teacher. Just saying. Infriga! Plus Fazare! Snowballs would have been a fun middle ground. Not full on ice ball, but something with some zip behind it. And then someone's like, he probably needed to drill her harder and more seriously. Gross. Up until the end of Changes, Harry was doing a pretty good job of teaching Molly to be a decent person. But he did a crappy job of making her an independent one, especially considering that he was tutoring her during wartime. Yeah, I totally get that. I think a solid part of it was that she was already at risk of abusing her power, and did, multiple times, even after PG, which I assume here means proven guilty. If you'll remember, Proven Guilty was the book where Molly became his apprentice, under the doom of Damocles, you know, kind of how Harry got his second chance. It must have been dancing on a fine line to teach someone like that. It's like teaching someone high-level physics and a bit of engineering. You get a talented and curious person. You don't need to teach them how to build a nuke, they just kind of figure it out. As someone who knows a lot of people who studied that sort of thing in college, yeah, I mean, it's really hard, but if you try, it's not impossible. Benevolent sexism. Thy name is Harry. And Molly's lack of skills, as of the end of Changes, is a good example of why even benevolent sexism is problematic when looked at through the lens of the events in Ghost Story. You can't go easy on someone just because she's a girl. This has nothing to do with social kindness, which people should practice no matter what sex or gender somebody is. But when it comes to practical skills, competence knows no sex or gender. And I completely agree. As I said earlier, I think that Molly was kind of gone easy on, especially after all the traumatic things that she went through in Proven Guilty. I know it's kind of boring to just listen to me agree with people, but this doesn't happen a lot, and I assume that there's going to be some more tumultuous times coming up. The first two books have moments of luck and coincidence that are simply bad. The one that stands out in my mind is Stormfront, I think. When Harry just starts wandering around town in thought, happens to end up at the crime scene, goes in, finds evidence he missed, and then the photographer shows up at the exact same time. It just felt like Butcher was like, I don't know how to get from here to the end of the book, so I'm just gonna make it happen. You know, I kind of get that. Honestly, when I first read the series, I almost gave up after reading Full Moon, which is the second book, and Stormfront's the first book. I didn't like those two books. I had a friend basically have to convince me to keep going, and that doesn't happen a lot. But I am so glad I did. But yeah, I think that because it was his first couple books, Jim Butcher didn't do quite as good of a job on those as he did the rest of the series, and it just seems like the series got better from there. I thought these were supposed to be unpopular opinions, but they all agree with me. Maybe that's why I'm unpopular. I think that it's a rather common opinion. So do I. Dresden is cool, the world is cool, but Butcher was a total noob writer. And in all honesty, compared to most urban fantasy books, even the first few Dresden novels are ahead of the curve. Yeah, I remember getting super cringy feelings when I started reading the Anita Blake series, and I couldn't get past the first 15 or 20%, past the first scene where they're in the vampire club. I do think that Dresden Files is written in a much less cringy fashion, and it does a good job of balancing the different elements, the noir detective novel with the supernatural paranormal mystery. Because, you know, some urban fantasy series kind of read like fan fiction, and ain't no one got time for that. The Denarians as a whole are underdeveloped, and we are told, not shown, how the senior council, wardens, white council, etc. are dangerous. Let's see what the comments say. Yup. These are fallen angels, but for some reason only Nick is impressive. I'd love to know more about the lore behind them. You know, I can kind of see that, like Nicodemus is pretty terrifying, but I also think that the rest of them are pretty terrifying too. Like, they're nightmare fuel, you know? Nick is one of the only ones where the fallen angel isn't in control, ironically. Yeah, he still seems to have his wits about him. It's probably why he's the leader and the main baddie here. Yep. Still, you'd think that beings who are vessels for the 30 fallen Lucifer considered the most dangerous would be more impressive. The actual fallen in control could be a bit more fleshed out. You'd think Lashiel and Enduriel are the only ones with any sense. To a degree, mortals carry a lot of metaphysical power in the Dresden verse because free will is such a thing. That explains a lot of it. Still, 2,000 years of experience paired with the Fallen's knowledge probably should make the Denarians a little bit stronger, even if the Fallen themselves are limited. Yeah, I can agree with that. Speaking of 2,000-year-old beings, I wonder what would happen if Harry Dresden went and got a beer with Atticus O'Sullivan from the Iron Druid Chronicles. I think Atticus would probably enjoy the company just because he's kind of good at pretending he's a 22-year-old guy. But at the same time, he's more experienced and should be more powerful than Dresden. I don't know. I think Dresden could probably take him in a fight, but I think that they'd probably have a couple beers and enjoy each other's company first. But I think those two guys would be bros about it. I'm not a huge fan of Butters. I think he has some great moments early on in the first few books he's in, but then time passes. I just find him to be more and more annoying, and would have preferred him pretty much staying in the background as a friend and occasional medic. I actually really like Butters, but I think that's because I have a friend in real life who's like a female version of Butters. Like, really insecure, but can do some amazing things when she puts her mind to it. And I think that it's important to acknowledge those kinds of characters too. Harry can be such an overwhelming protagonist in some of these books, and it's nice to see how he interacts with other people and how other people who aren't nearly as OP as him can be powerful and helpful and save the world and stuff. But let's see what the comments have to say. I agree. Frankly, he's a bit of a tool now. I enjoyed his character development, from mousy and timid to clued in and semi-confident. But then the Knights of the Cross thing, I just don't know. It felt like jumping the shark a bit. Don't know. Made sense to me, especially after rereading the series. The foreshadowing is there. This reminds me, I really need to continue rereading the series. I kind of dropped off a bit. I felt pretty much nothing when Susan went bye-bye, except sympathy that it hurt Harry so much. I disliked her character from the first mention. Commenter, me too. I was relieved when she was gone. I groaned at the first line of changes because she was back, and I'm glad we're done with her. Yeah, I never liked Susan either. I always felt that she was just trying to get a story out of Harry, and then things just fell into place after that. Even though he's kind of like a reformed neckbeard, he still deserves a little bit better. She was honestly horrible. She ruined Harry's life. How so? As someone else said, basically she instigated almost every major plot point in the books she was in, besides Full Moon. She followed him to a party of vampires and got in by falsifying the information, thinking for some reason she could outsmart creatures who'd been around for hundreds of years. Silly girl. Harry told her not to go, that it's too dangerous, and she didn't listen, even though she knows how dangerous this world can get. So she got turned. Yeah, that whole part was pretty cringe when I read that book the first time, but at least we met Thomas in that book. Murphy had good reasons to distrust Harry in the early books. I can see that. She's a very direct person, and she's very no-nonsense. I think Harry trying to hide all his Wizarding World stuff from her to protect her just drove a wedge between them. And then when he couldn't get away with that anymore, they kind of fell into line together once they realized what they were up against. I think that shows a lot of character on Murphy's part. She was able to trust him eventually, and she stuck to trying to get her job done. She truly cared about the people that she was protecting in Chicago, and I think that Harry just made it harder for her by keeping things from her. I'd be surprised if that one was unpopular, to be honest. Consider the first few books from Murphy's perspective instead of what we were told, and what we saw following Harry, and she's absolutely right. Honestly, I'd totally read a rewrite of Strongfront. I think they mean Stormfront there, and Full Moon from Murphy's point of view. Me too. Then someone disagrees. Ooh, let's see what happens. Not if she hired him. Treating your PI as your prime suspect is dumb. Initially, yes. But basically, when your options are, this person is more involved than he's letting on, and this person can literally cast magic spells. I mean, if a police officer in the real world opted to go with B instead of A, I think we'd be seriously disturbed by the state of our police force. And since Murphy lived in basically the real world, she was right to at least be suspicious. Ghost Story was good the first time around, and Skin Game was mildly disappointing, though they're both fantastic on reread. I hated Ghost Story. I hated that book so much. Not even James Marsters' gorgeous voice could save it for me. Oh my goodness. I was so glad when that book was finally over. I don't know, it was just such a slog. You're right, that is an unpopular opinion. Why am I agreeing with so many things on this post when it's supposed to be unpopular opinions? I actually thought that Skin Game was a lot of fun. The whole going into Hades' realm and how the name Cerberus means spot, that was hilarious. Like, I'll never forget that. And I just had so much fun with Skin Game. Yeah, it sets up some troubling things for later on, but I thought it was a lot of fun. And I think it's one of those books in the series where it seems kind of like filler, but later on it'll be a lot more important than what we give it credit for now. The building on fire was Harry's fault. It's always Harry's fault. I think TV show Dresden's hockey stick staff was excellent and just so well captured Harry Dresden. I couldn't get 15 minutes into the TV show. I was so mad that I had bought the entire season. I knew it was going to be horrible. I decided, hey, I will separate the book from the show and try to enjoy them as two separate pieces of art. And while I think the actors tried to do the best that they could with the material that they were given, I thought that it was a flaming pile of garbage, and I never want to think about it again. Murphy and Dresden would be a terrible couple, and any possibility of it happening is fan service gone horribly wrong. Edit. Ooh. You know somebody got some backlash when they have to have an edit in there. I mean, I could see it as a casual physical relationship, but anything romantic just wouldn't work with them. I actually disagree with this. I think both of them have been through so much that honestly, any other partner would just not be what they needed. You know when two people have the same shared experiences and it just bonds them? I think that's what Karen and Dresden have. They've also got this whole loyalty thing where they actually care about each other, and they seem to be into each other physically, you know? So I think that they would actually make each other very, very happy. Let's see what the comments have to say. I don't know if it's romantic as much as exhaustion and understanding. They're both tired of being alone, they're beaten down, emotionally and physically. They're basically the only person who can understand the other's life and decisions. They care about each other, and they don't see any other options, so why fight it? This person knows what I was just talking about. Except I think they said it way better than I did. Absolutely. It reminds me of friends who have a marriage pact. You know the whole, if neither of us is married by the time we're 30, we're gonna go get hitched thing. At some point, they're both just tired of being alone and want to know that someone is there for them. Kind of like a legally binding friends with benefits situation. Does anybody actually go through with those? I hope so, but I've never seen it happen. And of course, there's an Ask Reddit post. There's always an Ask Reddit post. There's always someone who's actually gone through with this kind of thing. Right on. Never thought to search for that. Thank you. I don't mean to be rude, but you should always search for things. If it exists, it's on the internet. Ooh. That's how I feel about Harry and Molly. No good will ever come of her crush on him. Yeah. Like, I don't care how old they get. I feel like if one person's an adult when you're like a preteen, that they're off limits. 100%. I don't care if they're both like 100 years old and fully consenting adults. That's just gross. Dresden should have banged Murphy a long time ago. Now I find their relationship so tiring. Have you been talking to Bob lately? Unpopular opinion. Bob has great taste in reading material. Alright, good people of Reddit, I will let you write that fanfiction. Actually, a choose-your-own-adventure story written by Bob would probably be hilarious. Jim Butcher, make that happen. The TV show is enjoyable on its own merit. Lies! We've already talked about how much I hate the show, so I'm not even going to glorify the rest of this comment thread with a response. Except for, you know, what I just said. Jim isn't an amazing writer. He's good at what he does, but he's not what some people around here seem to think he is. I've seen the Dresden Files compared to Lord of the Rings and A Song of Ice and Fire multiple times, and they aren't even close to being comparable in talent or content. This doesn't make Jim bad, nor does it make the Dresden Files inferior, but it's urban fantasy noir with a ton of pop culture. It's pulpy and fast-paced, and that's fine. I actually really agree with this. I think that there's books that I read because I want a long epic fantasy that's well thought out, something that is more literary, and then there's Dresden Files, which is just fun. Both have their place, both have value as books. There is one thing that I think Jim does better than most authors, though. He knew where he was going from the very beginning, and I think it's very evident because his books don't feel like just thrown together to make more money and publish another book. You gotta give the man credit where credit is due. I would say he's an excellent writer with a different scope. Making a huge landscape for your story doesn't make you a great writer. Lord of the Rings is notable for the insane backstory and mythos that Tolkien created. I don't think A Song of Ice and Fire deserves to be compared to that any more than the Dresden Files does. Honestly, I haven't read Tolkien since like middle school, so I don't know if I can add any value to that point of view. But I do think that both A Song of Ice and Fire and Tolkien's world have extensive backstories. I mean, you have the Silmarillion, you have Fire and Blood, and you have a lot of stuff that the movies and TV shows didn't cover that people on YouTube have been able to talk about and explore just outside of the mainstream story. And I think it's awesome. I don't know if one is better than the other. I just know that Tolkien is like the granddaddy of fantasy. I should probably go back and read both series, to be completely honest. I think Molly is reading the journals to a future boy child of Maggie's. That kind of makes me sad. Just because I've always gotten these vibes that Dresden is going to turn out to be the bad guy or not make it till the end of the series. And I can see Molly sort of mentoring either Maggie or one of Maggie's children later on. The Warden of Demonreach should, ex officio, be a member of the Senior Council. It's an important position created by Merlin, and the Council just ignores it. The Blackstaff should, ex officio, be a non-voting member of the Senior Council, and be barred from becoming a voting member. Great power requires knowledge to use wisely, but should come with a price. The Gatekeeper's job description should not be secret. He should be recruiting replacements and reinforcements. I can totally see that. The Warden of Demonreach is supposed to be a position of honor, or at least a very useful position. I mean, Demonreach houses some pretty scary things in there. And you'd think that they'd want to keep the position filled on the regular, instead of, have Harry just discover it, decide he was going to go for it, and then do it. And it's also kind of weird that the body that gives the orders and the Blackstaff are not mutually exclusive. Ebenezer has so much power, and he can break the laws of magic, and it's probably too much power to give him the decision-making ability around how he uses that power, at least insofar as being a voting member contributes to that. And yeah, the Gatekeeper really should have apprentices. You would think that there would be a Special Forces version of the Wardens that would go and help him, but apparently not. Ooh, this is a good point. His existence, talking about the Blackstaff, cannot be made known since the Blackstaff violates laws. It would split the council. Also, Blackstaff chooses his successor by himself without consulting anybody else, so I think this position is more tolerated begrudgingly than anything else. That's a good point. The laws of magic are very serious, and there's very serious consequences for breaking them. I can definitely see someone trying to make a power play by messing with that position. Maybe Christos will try that. Alright y'all, I think that does it for us. If you like what I do, please hit the subscribe button and join the Cav Nation. We'd love to have you. If you like videos like this, tell me in the comments down below and I'll try to do some more of them. And if you think I suck at this whole YouTube thing, tell me down below and I will try to suck better next time. Bye!